I've introduced the speakers, so we can go without further ado to Chiara. And the IEA has worked on a number of documents, and recently published was the heat pumps in China document. And I had the pleasure to review the technology development document that is not yet public, but maybe Chiara can share a little bit of the preliminary insights with us already. So where do you see the industrial policy on the world level? How do we compare in Europe with our heat pump market, our industrial policy, when it comes to competitiveness with other regions of the world?
Thanks, Thomas. And first is that I want to say that we notice that countries are moving fast on industrial policies for several reasons: energy security, meeting climate targets, but also to be competitive in the new energy economy that is emerging. We see that investments in clean energy have grown 50% from 2019, to 2023, reaching 1.8 trillion in 2023. And clean technology manufacturing is following very closely in investment growth. So it's really an opportunity for competitiveness for several countries, and we see that building blocks in the world are investing in industrial policies from the US, India, China, and of course European Union. Concerning heat pumps, we've noticed that the sales slowdown in 2023 had an impact on announcement investments for the sector. And the European Union was the only region with announcement in expanding manufacturing capacity for heat pumps. And we estimated that if those announcements, billion of euros, 4 billion just on assembly, if those would have been achieved in full, climate targets for Europe could be met already. But we saw that the slowdown in sales in 2023 might actually impact decisions, investment decisions there, and posing challenges to achieve such targets. For instance, we have seen already slowdown on downscaling on manufacturing of lines, heat pump producing lines, and also impacts on jobs. As Thomas said, more than 2,000 jobs were impacted over last year. So maybe the key message that I leave from here is that a stable market is really needed, stable policies are really needed to push demand up for heat pumps in Europe and allow industry to follow. And yeah, I leave it there for now.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Chiara. I would hand over to Stefano, and sorry for not spotting you in the audience earlier. But how do you see that in Europe? Europe praises itself for being a leader, wanting to be a leader in clean tech worldwide. Do you see that this leadership is achieved these days? And maybe do you share also what Chiara said regarding the heat pump sector from a European perspective?
Okay, thank you. Yeah, thank you for the invitation. First, 3 minutes, 3 messages. First, well, +1, inspired by you. I haven't spent much time praising myself or anybody in my team. We have not about slapping each other in the back. I think we've worked a lot and achieved a lot, but you know, huge challenges ahead. As she said, things are moving very fast. And I mean, I don't have to tell an audience of professionals of the sector that the last couple of years have been pretty much rock and roll and a bit of a roller coaster. So the 3 messages are: 1, we are aware of the instabilities on the market and that things are moving fast. The second one is under this mandate with this commission and this commissioner, we have spent a lot of our time designing a business case, a new business case to boost the energy transition while trying to shore up industrial competitiveness with all the difficulties that we have. So there's been first industrial strategy, then the reviewed industrial strategy, the Green Deal with the climate law, Fit for 55, the winter package, Repower Europe, the Green Deal industrial plan, the 2040 climate target recommendation, that frame a regulatory framework to steer and accelerate investments, to meet our targets, our climate targets, to ensure climate environmental sustainability, economic and financial sustainability, and hey, we've all discovered also political and geopolitical sustainability and management of our dependencies. So we have the Net Zero Industry Act with its pillars. Caroline has talked to you about it. We have the CHIPS Act, the Critical Raw Materials Act. Crucially for eco-design, for the sector here, which is already a victim of eco-design, we have a super expanded upcoming eco-design regulatory framework, which will do a lot of things, including affecting you, because even though we're not going to do expanded eco-design for heat pumps right away, one of the first targets, two of the first targets are still on aluminum probably. So there's going to be an impact. So we've tried to, I mean, what we have tried to do at least, I don't know, I mean, not for me to judge how successful we've been, probably for you more, for stakeholders, is to combine the objectives with the transition with the fact that we want to have this transition, but not by the industrializing. Reducing emission by the industrializing is stupid, not least because we'll keep importing stuff which has an even bigger carbon footprint. And, you know, and then there are all the social, political implications of this. The third message is that, as you might have seen if you followed the clean transition dialogues that have been set up by Vice President Šefčovič and by the presidents, we're not closing shop on this, and I'm overstepping my 3 minutes, but Thomas, I don't think that the Commission has given signals of retreating. You were saying that in your introduction. I don't think so. We've planted so much that it would be good if we started harvesting what we planted in terms of policy actions, financial instruments, regulatory instruments, et cetera, without creating a monster usina gas of further regulation and instruments.
Thank you very much. I think I am speaking on behalf of the industry when we beg to differ slightly, at least. It seems to be that a lot of sectors are getting more visible support, let's call it like that, and that we see that the withdrawal. So we don't have a heat pump act, not to say heat pump action plan again, but we don't have a heat pump act. We have other acts, and we do think that it would be helpful to protect this industry, which is, as documented by the IEA, typically very European, also via symbolic action on a high level. But this is not, I don't want to debate that. It's just that's the perception of the industry as we stand. And maybe we can go into the discussion a bit later. Philipp, you're taking an outside view. And I think we all agree there is a lot of change. And Stefano, I'd also agree that you have done a lot, and we have had to accommodate for a plethora of legislative change that came our way. Are we really fast enough, or are we just doing a lot, Philipp? Do you think that what Europe is doing, all these different policy measures and initiatives, are they meeting the challenge of becoming or staying competitive on the global level?
Yeah, thanks, Thomas, for having me. And I think this is great that we have the debate this week, in the week of the expected competitiveness deal and the European Council discussion. I think the situation is really, really serious. I mean, if you just look at what happened with the Antwerp Declaration that now has 1,000 signatories, I think that's quite an outcry from the industry. Also, the clean transition dialogues that the Commission fortunately hosted. When you read the conclusions, I mean, the things that business is asking for, there is some of the things are quite basic, some quite fundamental and important, and obviously these things haven't been addressed. So I think whatever happens with the competitiveness deal cannot be another industrial policy that will be presented and then recycled a year later. And I'm guilty as well. I was part of the Juncker team for 4 years, so I was part of that machine as well. I'm not pointing at others, but I think the situation at the moment is very, very serious. Also, when you look at the numbers, China, there's a new BNEF, Bloomberg New Energy Finance publication out, China now has 80% of manufacturing in 11 clean tech sectors, global manufacturing, yeah? So PV, batteries, minerals, some other things, 70% already in electrolyzers, and electrolyzers similar to heat pumps are actually one of the areas where the Europeans are, or thought they could be leading. 60% of wind nacelles. Fortunately, we had a wind power package from the Commission, so there's some action ongoing. But just to say, this is very, very serious. And when you read these industry declarations, it's clear that not everyone thinks that enough has been done. I mean, a lot has been done. Yeah, you mentioned the 2040 communication now and the Green Deal and the Fit for 55 package. But in terms of funding, for instance, we haven't barely seen anything. I mean, Net Zero Industry Act did not come with funding. The STEP proposal that the Commission put forward was already a recycled sovereignty fund. So a year ago, we wanted to have a sovereignty fund that then turned into the STEP fund. And then in the end, the STEP fund is non-existent or very, very small, which is not to blame on the Commission, because this was the European Council that prioritized Ukraine aid over clean tech funding. Understandable, yeah, but it's a problem. And you also, and that's the difference to the United States, you don't have private funding in the same amount. So venture investment in clean tech in Europe has now plateaued for the third year in a row. So it's at 11 billion per year. It hasn't changed over 3 years, which is not a good development, because normally this should increase. Banks, pension funds are very risk averse in Europe, not unlike in the US. So we also don't get any funding from these sources. So just to say, it's a serious situation. I wrote down 3 things that I wanted to highlight from the clean transition dialogues that I thought were very important and that I hope will not get lost in transition. The first are indicators, and that's quite astonishing. But I mean, the industry asked the Commission to put forward indicators to measure success of what's happening. So far, we've been measuring greenhouse gas emissions. Now they ask us to please also count jobs, count manufacturing capacity, count investments, all these kind of things that have not been tracked, unfortunately. Then competition policy and the inclusion of the external dimension in competition policy. I think that would be quite an important change. And I think the colleague from the Belgian presidency hinted at the fact that this is discussed. And then resilience requirements in auctions. I think otherwise it will be very difficult to ever ramp up domestic manufacturing. Yeah, so just a plea to really try to get these things right.
Well, thanks a lot. Do you want to answer on that, Stefano? Is that so new to you that is that an insight that you received from the transition dialogues that we need indicators? I know it is, but wouldn't you normally say that if you want to manage something, you have to measure? It's an old management school wisdom.
No, it's not. It's not. I mean, it's confirmation. We've tried to come up with as much information and evidence base for a policy action from the go, at least from as long as I've been involved in this area. The Net Zero Industry Act, if you see how it's been generated, doesn't have an impact assessment because we could not afford a 2-year process. We had a 7-week process from the idea to the presentation of the Commission proposal. But all that we've tried to do besides drafting the proposal is having a respectable knowledge base to inspire and support it. And there are 2 staff working documents with the needs and the directions in terms of data that support the preparation of the Net Zero Industry Act. And so it goes. But yeah, I mean, it's markets, sectors, policy, situation, geography, etc. Geopolitics are moving fast, and there's a constant requirement to have adapted scientific knowledge base to support policy and regulatory action, of course.
Well, thank you. Chiara, you're measuring basically the developments constantly, qualitatively and maybe also quantitatively. There is always this view on the competition between EU and China. My understanding is that we don't look so much at the United States, and you have recently published this report. How do you think do the major blocs support clean tech industries, but maybe in particular heat pumps, and what is there to learn from China? Because China is always the fearful partner in the debate.
Yes, thanks for the question. So first, as I mentioned before, now all countries are moving to develop industrial policies, and maybe one key number is that we see that there are hundreds of billions invested in clean technology manufacturing last years, but most of which are wind and solar, and most of which are in China. So at the moment, heat pumps are a bit underrepresented in these investments, but there are industrial policies moving. So for instance, of course, the Inflation Reduction Act has driven up manufacturing capacity investments in solar and batteries in particular. In India, there has been India's production-linked incentives that drove up manufacturing capacity in solar PV. Again, in the European Union, we saw particular new entries in the market of batteries, specifically. And something that is interesting maybe for the heat pumps market is that we saw that investments are not moving so fast in European and in the US. And the same can be said for electrolyzers. But then, as Thomas said, the case of China is particularly interesting for heat pumps. China now, for heat pumps in buildings in particular, is the largest market and also the largest manufacturing hub. But what's interesting is that they didn't have any specific policies related to heat pumps, but we highlighted 3 factors of the success of China for the heat pump market. One is very clear heating policies in the north. They developed very clear pilot projects over batches to develop heat pumps in cities. And they had subsidies for the clean to electricity and clean to gas program, so in rural areas. And these were very successful. In the center of China, with milder climate, there has been a recognition that heat pumps are already affordable solutions that can deliver both heating and cooling. And these recognitions have been also supported by reduction of the operational price of heat pumps. So they put in place time of use tariffs that have been quite impactful in some provinces to reduce the overall operating cost of heat pumps. So really the efficiency gains being reflected in consumers' bill, and that had a very big impact for the Chinese market. And then of course they have quite good supply chain already developed on the air conditioning market that they developed since the 70s. So of course, quite cheaper units compared to what's actually happening in Europe. And we saw that there have been imports, exports rising from China to Europe in the last 2 years. So this, of course, is something important to track and see how it develops over the next years as well.
And that is very interesting. Do you see a similar discussion on an industrial policy in China, or is this just happening because it's by tradition centralized?
Yeah, it's mostly because it's centralized, but maybe something that we recommended actually in the report that you mentioned before is the future of heat pumps in China, and it focuses also on industrial heat pumps, district heating and buildings, but something that we recommended is to align more clean heating policies with broader energy and climate policies once developing an industrial strategy. So yeah, it's centralized, but yeah, we saw that for heat pumps is not yet part of a broader, let's say, central government policy at the moment.
Let's jump back to the Europe and US debate. Philipp, Breakthrough Energy has been very vocal on this need for combining green and industrial policy. You could also call it a policy innovation in this context. And you have made the point, citing from the Clean Transition Dialogues. Do you think that these requests by industry are heard now, or is that still a request that you need to repeat and repeat and repeat?
difficult to say. I mean, there's the council discussion this week, but it's the traditional competitiveness council discussion in spring, right? And as I said, I hope that they really move into action. But I mean, the next week will tell. I cannot tell you today.
And how do you perceive it? Maybe you, but also Stefano. Do we have a good chance that these council conclusions will come to fruition? And do you think that they can govern also in the next 5 years for the next commission? Is that something we can establish today already, or will the next commission take the freedom and select different focus areas?
Well, there are two separate aspects here. I think they are a logical step in the direction that we've taken over at least the last 3 years. So they are part of a path. Industrial policy is back in town. It wasn't, I mean, if you wind the clock back to pre-COVID, who was talking about industrial policy? Breton a little bit at the start, then all of this budding policy intentions were swallowed by first COVID and then the aggression of Russia on Ukraine, the aggression of Ukraine by Russia. But it's there to stay. The Antwerp Declaration was mentioned. It's obviously a part of the same landscape. As regards the next commission, I mean, I'm a commission official for 30 years now. I've seen 30 years almost. I've seen commissions come and go. So my crystal ball tells me that without prejudice to who will be the next commissioner for industry, will be the next president, et cetera, what the distribution of portfolios is going to be, not to talk about the results of the European elections. This is not about to go away. Industrial policy is in town, competitiveness is in town, and they're going to be, in my sort of experienced view, here to stay for a while.
I think we would appreciate that. Walburga, I want to give you the floor for this, a bit of an external insight. Walburga, you had 2 slides or 3 slides. Do I get them?
Yeah, I don't know whether we needed them, but you know.
Please let us know. You had a winning streak recently. You have basically, together with the commission, with different commissioners, announced acts after initiatives. So it seems that you have very well established the foundation also for a photovoltaic policy for the next 5 years. What can we learn from that sector?
What you're referring to is the solar charter that we signed yesterday with 23 member states. The commission, Kerstin Joanna, your director general, was there, and the industry. But before I'm answering your question, let me just pause here for a minute, because I think it is now the time, I think it's your last day, to thank you for the great cooperation that both our sectors had over the last couple of years. I hope it's going to continue also when you're not there anymore. But I really do think that it is thanks to you and your team that heat pumps are on the agenda of European policymakers, and I think that's worthwhile a really big applause. And the last thing that we did together was the rooftop event, where we were showcasing, you know, how our technologies are working together. Even if you cannot imagine today that there is something like partying on a rooftop, you're very well invited to come to our next one, which is on the 3rd of September. Back to your question. Indeed, you know, there's a couple of things that have helped the solar sector to progress further, that the European Commission has been putting on the agenda. The solar strategy 2 years ago was the starting point, where we had a strategy for the solar sector only, and now we have been focusing yesterday by signing the solar charter on solar manufacturing, and as a topic of today as well. I would like to pick up what you said in your introduction, Stefano, because you said the transition cannot be at the cost of deindustrialization, if I understood you correctly, and this is completely correct, because we do think that the Green Deal very well goes together with Europe's competitiveness, and it's high time indeed that competitive is now back on the agenda again. We've been calling for that over the last 5 years for the solar sector. And it's going so well together because it's about cheap energy in the end. Europe is just not competitive because in the US, in China, the energy costs are far lower than the energy costs that we have in Europe. That's one of the reasons, because the other thing that has been discussed at the clean tech dialogues was red tape in Europe, which is really a pain for European companies. And cheap energy prices, that means rolling out renewables and electrifying Europe. Big times. At the moment, electrification is stagnating. We are staying at 23-22% of the whole energy mix, while the goal of the European Commission for the last 5 years is to heavily electrify. And that has to do, not the least, because industrial demand is also going down. It has to do with the crisis. It has to do also with deindustrialization that we see in Europe. So there's two things that are equally important, which is rolling out renewables as quickly and as fast as possible. It's just proven it's the cheapest energy that we can use, homegrown electricity. And the second one is reindustrializing Europe, and that needs bold industrial strategy. The European Commission has been working very hard in the last couple of months, putting forward an industrial strategy. And by the way, just to mention, these are two things that are equally important for both the solar sector and the heat pump sector. Going fast on rolling out renewables, and you've mentioned it in the beginning that the faster we go on solar, the faster we also go on heat pumps, and reindustrializing Europe. But we have to do it smart, because indeed we don't have the same market structures, we don't have the same tools as we have in the US or in India and in China. And I do think that the steps that the European Commission has been setting to start with are the right ones. The Net Zero Industry Act, we are looking forward to the implementation. What we signed yesterday, for example, is really member states that should speed up the implementation of the Net Zero Industry Act, resilience criteria to be playing a very important role in auctions. We're calling for resilience auctions tout court, so that we have auctions that are dedicated to pushing for European products. And we would hope that member states will be very fast in rolling out these resilience auctions. And maybe now we could show the slides quickly, and then I'm done with my introduction, the second one. Because this is showing the example of solar, and there's two learnings from it. This is, I don't know whether you see it well. So that's the different years when solar has been growing from basically 0 to the 56 gigawatt that we installed last year. So 56, more than 56, 57 probably, according to the latest figures. So basically what we're doing is really a very fast growth. But as you saw, there was a very fast growth back in the years 2011 already, which was all of a sudden coming to a halt. And there were two reasons for it. And I'm coming back to what you said, Chiara. We need a stable regulatory environment. We need a stable framework so that sectors can grow. And this is exactly what happened in 2011. That all of a sudden member states, for whatever reason, said like, oh yeah, we're not incentivizing from one day to the next the technology anymore. We are going to introduce tax cuts and so on and so forth. So that was the first thing. And the second thing is that at the same time, protectionist measures were introduced. So the demand for solar was really going down, but at a very, very fast pace, up until protectionist measures have been lifted, and we have been seeing more stable framework again for the technology. This is when solar was thriving again, and this is where we see the enormous growth that we have been seeing, for 40% growth every year over the last 3 years. we still need to grow further because what we need is 70 gigawatt on average in order to get to the 2030 goals. But this is a very, very important message, stable regulatory framework. And the second slide, just quickly, is all we do think is necessary for a bold industrial strategy. I'm not going into all the details, but I was already mentioning ENSIA, which is a very important step in the right direction. But we do need European financing as well. It is all about financing, member state financing, European financing, and I know how difficult it is. Everyone is asking you for money, but you know, it's a question of putting the right focus on, you know, key technologies. This is what China has done, and this is what Europe also needs to do. I stop it here, and we can discuss further. But I think this is the key ingredients if we want to thrive when it comes to electrification technologies like heat pumps, like solar and others.
I mean, thank you. There are some measures that you propose that are quite interventional, right? So they would not go so well with a market-based economy, or am I completely wrong?
You might think that.
I see Stefano smiling. So,
but you know, the thing is, we have lost years, 15 years in Europe. You know, solar, just to give you that example of solar again, solar has been, so Europe has been the cradle of solar technology some 15, 20 years back. This is where solar started. But then we lost it because demand was plummeting and because China decided that solar is a key technology they want to push. And if we would have continued at the time, I think all these measures would not be necessary at this point in time, but we need to catch up, and that needs huge investments, that needs scaling up our industry again from basically zero. You know, last year, what we were able to produce in Europe was 2% of the demand we had in Europe, 2%. So we need to big time scale up again, and that needs big investments at a very short in a very short amount of time. And this is why, unfortunately, because we lost 15 years, we now have to really get you know, the competitive edge of our industry back.
Then I want to come, do you want to answer directly?
Yeah, I mean, in the end, it's all about money, right? I mean, your question, can the next commission, or can we now commit for an industrial strategy for the next commission? In the end, it comes down to money and how do we spend that money? And I think that was also my initial point. Our main disadvantage at the moment is that we have no clean tech investment plan in Europe, whereas the Chinese are subsidizing a lot and the Americans have a very effective Inflation Reduction Act. So what I think, there are three things that we should think about, and one is actually quite short term. So with the wind sector, with the wind package, we had the EIB counter guarantee facility, which was a 5 billion facility that helped the wind sector back on its feet because they weren't able to get bank loans anymore. We see similar problems in many emerging clean tech sectors where companies want to build their first manufacturing unit, but banks say, oh, this is too risky, I'm not going to give you a loan for that. So one thing that could be achieved very short term that can help some manufacturers, for instance, in the electrolyzer sector, is to expand this EIB counter guarantee facility to other sectors, and that requires a top up to InvestEU, which is currently blocked in some capitals, it seems. The second question for the medium term for me would be, I mean, one source of money one could think about is the ETS, but not only today's ETS, but the future ETS. Yeah? So the ETS price is supposed to reach 120 euros in 2030, but all that money might be much more useful now. So if we could, for instance, borrow against future ETS revenues and set up a massive clean tech investment plan already at the beginning of the next mandate, that could actually help Walburga and others get their sectors back on the feet. Yeah? And then the last one is pension funds that we really need to think about with Capital Markets Union, with de-risking tools. How can we tap into all that money? Because barely any of that is going into clean tech.
Well, we need to shift that debate a little bit because that was very interesting for the industries in need at the moment. The industry that we're talking to here this morning is at the moment not subject to this suffering. I mean, they're suffering, we are suffering, and exactly. And I hope I don't regret that I said before that that the solar industry is front running the heat pump industry, because we do not intend to follow on the total breakdown of manufacturing capacity in Europe, but it will need stronger support, because what we have heard now is that the European Commission and many other stakeholders are supporting the solar industry and the wind industry and the battery industry and the electrolyzer industry. And it seems, and I've actually heard that from Commission officials, that the heat pump industry is still considered as not in the need for that support because you're here and because you're established and you don't need that support. We have also heard from Chiara that in their net zero energy emission scenario, we can only, with currently announced capacities, manufacture on 60% of the capacity that is needed, if I understand that correctly, right? So Stefano, if we want to move towards a European industrial policy, and maybe also Carolina, you're still here, so shouldn't that be something that gets much more prominent recognition in order to avoid that we have to repair something that will break if we don't keep demand in Europe today?
Okay, I profoundly disagree with your view that the heat pump sector is a child of a lesser god compared to other sectors, that we've done act after act after act. All the acts we've done, which relevantly here are the Net Zero Industry Act, the Critical Raw Materials Act, the CHIPS Act, if you want, and in a different plan, the Eco-Design for Sustainable Products Regulation, have, in particular, as regards the Net Zero Industry Act, heat pumps fully within the scope as much as wind, solar, batteries, electrolyzer, et cetera, et cetera. You've been referring to charters that have been designed for solar and wind to prop up a crisis situation, but that are, where the most, for me, the most impactful parts are the idea to push member states to act and implement the critical provisions of the Net Zero Industry Act earlier or before they come into force and with force. And that is something that, ends up in a charter for the solar industry, because manufacturing, as she pointed out, as Walburga pointed out quite clearly, is going down the drain. But the regulatory measures that have been put in place and whatever financing it, and then again, I disagree also with the fact that industrial policy in the West started with the Inflation Reduction Act, where, by the way, the American government has proven spectacularly wrong in its calculation, because they were saying it's 370 billion. We are already, as per congressional estimates, about 900 billion and going towards $1 trillion. And we'll see if the next administration keeps it or pulls the plug. But anyway, if you look at public investments and state aid that have been earmarked for the green transition in Europe, there's been and there is an ocean of money, and there are a lot of possibilities with the TCTF, GBR, in particular with the TCTF, with state aid, and there's money being invested, public money being invested in projects in clean tech. So no, industrial policy in the West did not start with the Inflation Reduction Act. And actually, the Inflation Reduction Act, there's some interesting research on that, provides opportunities also for European business, but this is another chapter. So no, heat pumps are not the children of a lesser god compared to solar or wind or batteries or electrolyzers. Compared to PV panels, they are less of a commodity. So they are a bit in a different situations. The action plan on heat pumps has been delayed. I think this is a bit of an elephant in the room. I'm innocent. That's way above my pay grade, but the Commission has said that it is its intention to make sure that, subject to the decision of the next Commission, that this takes place under the next mandate soon. But okay, yeah, it's been delayed. And I have to say that my colleagues in DG Energy, which are fronting this and with whom we have a spectacularly good daily relationship, are also innocent.
Yes, we know that. So let's not dwell on it too much. One thing that is in this heat pump action plan, or pretty much in every other thing that we have written, including the manifesto, and one thing that is also shared by the Electrification Alliance, is the request to correct the ratio between gas and electricity prices. You have mentioned it, Walburga, other people have chimed in. Cheap electricity or cheap energy is the main driver of competitiveness. In Germany, there's a big discussion whether German industry has only been so competitive because we relied completely on Russian gas, which was basically given away for free. So do you see, and maybe, but that's also a question to everybody else, do you see a strong support for an electrification strategy, which would then be another way of doing an industry strategy that leads to much more competitive electricity prices, so that electrification means also competitive industry activity?
Absolutely. I mean, we know very well that from, by 2050, we have to double the production of electricity if we are to meet our own climate targets, and that this electricity has to be low carbon or decarbonized, and that it has to be available, accessible, and affordable. And the investments, political investments, regulatory investments, financial investment, public investment that are made in having a net zero industry act, having a critical material act, having a solar charter, having a solar strategy, having a wind charter, are all efforts in this direction. I mean, why would we have wind or solar or invest political capital, financial capital, human capital in renewables, and also in other forms of baseload, low carbon electricity, like nuclear, small modular reactor. We have launched an industry alliance. We are trying to revamp as Commission the difficult situation of ITER, et cetera, et cetera. So this is all about electrification.
Okay, I want to open the floor anyways for audience questions. So I don't know if any of my team could pick up some microphones, but who of you in the audience thinks that the electricity price is appropriate in Europe as we speak for a competitive energy transition in heating and cooling?
Well, not me, eh?
Okay, so at least we have one culprit where we say, okay, that is not working. So is there anything that we can do also in terms of an industry policy to address that issue? I would want to hand you the microphone over, but you just wanted to give a perspective, Caroline. But if you want to give an answer, I would, or an insight, can I?
I think that's a very difficult topic about energy prices. I don't know what to answer so right on the spot, but it's true that it's very important, and member states really also acknowledge this. We have put this in the council conclusions that energy prices are too high. And that, of course, also there are some different angles on this, but yeah, I don't think I can give you a solution, or also not with regard to the future, how to tackle it. But maybe, hey, look, Stefano wants to.
I mean, we are a small, densely populated, raw material and resource poor continent. What do we have to do if we want to electrify? Renewables. And that's again, the drive of, at least, I mean, like him and like it or not, the drive of Commissioner Breton's policy action for the duration of his mandate. Renewables and nuclear.
Philipp.
I just wanted to quote Chiara's boss, Fatih Birol, who said the two cardinal mistakes that Europe made was A, become a junkie of Russian gas, and B, shut down nuclear. And fortunately, that's being addressed. But of course, we all know that's not going to fix anything in the short term. I mean, no one's going to build reactors in 10 years. I think it's hard to solve. I think our answer would be accelerate new technologies. I mean, a lot of the costs today come from the system, right? System costs, integrating the renewables, storage systems. I think that there's a lot of potential, a lot of emerging technologies that need a bit of more funding to be pushed into commercial viability. And if you get some of these things online, you have a better functioning system, and you will gradually reduce costs. But it's of course not the silver bullet that will, set us to par with the US tomorrow.
I would give it to all of your attention, I mean, to all the documents that you're writing, also Caroline and the Council, if it could make it into the Council conclusions, to separate between fossil energy costs and electricity costs, because it's too easy to say energy costs and then you mean just one or the other and you choose by your liking. And I think it's also something that we would not claim that energy is too expensive per se. It's the relative energy costs that are wrong. It is the fossil energy that is too cheap, and it's the electricity that is increasingly cleaner that is too expensive. I guess that's something that we would agree here. And we know that in industry, in the decarbonization of industry, and that's a topic we are really focusing on at the moment, and that we have a lot of positive feedback for doing so. And we have quite a few of the manufacturers of big heat pumps in the room. There, it's particularly prevalent. If you want to decarbonize a sugar factory and you have no connection because the DSO didn't connect, and they tell you, we do this in 10 years, this will never fly. And then the second thing is, if you go to your accountants and you have to tell them, yes, we could electrify, we can decarbonize, we can reduce CO2 emissions, but unfortunately it costs you double. This project is off the table immediately. So I think it is a very good starting point, and I understand it's very difficult because it would have to be tackled in the Energy Taxation Directive, and that is stalling for as long as I can think. It would be helpful to do something. I'm not expecting an answer. I'm just giving you the sentiment of the industry. Really, this is what we feel. We hear that we have an issue with financing, but if you talk to most people in this room, they will say, I get the money. The banks are functioning in Europe. They understand risk. And they will give money to heat pump manufacturers, to heat pump manufacturing site investments, if the business model behind that is proper. And if you then go to who is the business model, that's end users, that's industrial companies, that's commercial property owners, and they say, I will not invest in this technology. I just had the discussion with our landlord. We moved in a new office. They promised that they would put a heat pump in. Now they say, but the existing system is only 12 years old. We can just operate it for a bit longer because this electric heating is too expensive. And so, we're limiting ourselves if the fundamentals of a market-based single European market are not tackled. And I understand it's probably the conundrum of energy policy that this is not easy to do. But nonetheless, if these conclusions are supposed to be meaningful, if the industrialization strategy is supposed to be meaningful and protect a locally available industry, then this has to be tackled. So enough of my speech. Audience, what questions do you have to the panel? Martin, there's a microphone coming in your back.
Okay.
Martin Forsen, current president of EHPA.
Thank you. So, Martin Forsen, coming from the Swedish heat pump manufacturer NIBE. If we truly believe in electrification, that's the way forward, that's the way we have to go. How can it be that member states are allowed to have less taxes and levies on fossil fuels like gas than on clean electricity? How can that be that they are allowed to do that? Shouldn't there be an instrument also driving the direction so that we have a carbon instrument in energy taxation that will make the polluter pay, and the fossil fuel standing for a lot of the CO2 emissions, that's where we would like to see the high taxes and levies? Because it's fundamental, and Thomas has stressed it a lot now in his talks. That needs to be in place. We need to get the spark spread lowered. Otherwise, we will not take off. The electrification will not win. So how can it be that member states are allowed to have lower taxes and levies on fossil fuels than on clean and carbon lean electricity?
You're not asking the Commission, right? I mean, you're advocating for Brussels to stick its dirty fingers in the member states' tax cookie jar. I think the question should be asked of. No, I mean, more seriously, taxation is a fully national competence. So, and, you know, as much as a Eurocrat's wet dream might include common taxation policies, I mean, so far it's been a no-go area. It's purely national.
But at the same time, if we then look into the need for financing, where is the money coming from? I mean, how is all this going to be refinanced? We have heard Philipp say that the different funding pots have just been repurposed, sometimes remodeled, sometimes reworded, but it's probably not enough. In the Innovation Fund, we have 40 billion earmarked in the Green Industrial Plan, 40 billion earmarked over the decade, including for heat pumps. But then comes a crowding out effect from electrolyzers, from battery factories, which are all by an order of magnitude more expensive than any heat pump factory you could imagine. A good heat pump factory, 50, 60,000 square meters, goes for about 120 million. I think you don't start with electrolyzers on that ticket. So maybe I can then reword that question. Are we segregating the available funds enough, or is it the most expensive one with the biggest lobbying power will also reap the harvest here? Maybe Philipp also, how is that in the United States? It's easier, right? Because then it's a tax deduction, so I can just get as much as I want.
Yeah, it's a tax deduction, but it's also for specific sectors and not for others. No? I mean, it's very broad. I mean, I understand the Commission that, you know, the hydrogen strategy was launched in the pandemic. There's been a lot of political momentum behind hydrogen. So of course you want to make sure there's money going to hydrogen. I understand that. I think not to say here that hydrogen is more important than heat pumps. I think the fundamental dilemma, and that's also to your tax question. I mean, we are still or less now, but we were in a period of very high inflation. So in that time, when you then also increase energy consumer taxes, even though, of course, I agree, you know, fossil fuel subsidies should be removed, but you further boost the inflation, and that's a massive problem. And I think the other big dilemma is, of course, I mean, Europe has its 2050 Green Deal commitments. Europe now also needs and wants to be defense ready against Russia. At the Munich Security Conference a few months ago, some defense people said we need to be ready for war in 3 to 5 years. Europe also wants to have the most generous social welfare state in the world. So, of course, at some point, things are getting expensive and money is getting scarce. So that's why it's so important that heads of states stick their heads together and think about the future of our industry, essentially, because something needs to be prioritized.
Okay, Stefano, you have mentioned eco-design, and I understood that maybe eco-design is now prevailing an act, but that's fine. In eco-design, we see this big difficulty in really killing single-standing fossil boilers. Member states are really against that. Now, you're saying we don't have enough money, but if we could repurpose the money we give for the import of fossil energy by giving a clear message to industry that the times of single-standing fossil boilers are over, and the minimum that you have to do is hybrids, we would free money and we would accelerate the change.
Well, the current eco-design, there's been a lot of debate about the measure on space heaters. That's what we refer to. I think that in the end, the fact that it's technology neutral is the right approach. There is a legitimate boiler industry there, and if they manage to comply with increasingly progressive requirements, fine. I mean, not least that I'm going to speak to a similar event of the European heating industry tomorrow, and I don't want to be skinned alive, or maybe someone who's here is going to be there tomorrow and is going to say, oh, he said that you should all be, you know, out of business.
In the room. Yes, the answer is yes.
No, I mean, look, frankly, being putting into legislation like eco-design an obligation of effectiveness or as a result, independently of the technology used to get to the result, is the right approach. And we don't do financing of any sorts with eco-design. What's going to change seriously with the new regulatory framework, which is going to take its time to be put into place, is that we are moving from energy or energy and water using products, taken in the use phase only to basically potentially everything, with the exception of food, feed, and medicines, and taken in a life cycle approach. So the steel with which components of heat pumps or other things are made will be carbon footprinted, and pretty much everything else slowly but surely, starting with a priority products scaled according to impact, but it's going to make a hell of a lot of difference. In particular, because we are setting requirements for products that apply, obviously if properly enforced by our friends in the member states, to products regardless of where they're made. Because one of the arguments now, you take a heat pump or solar panels that are, or a fridge or whatever, that it's made in China instead of being made in Europe. We've reduced emission in Europe, but we've done the planet no favors because we haven't reduced global emissions or the global carbon footprint on the other hand. So I wouldn't conflate eco-design and financing. And I would argue again that shaping eco-design in terms of carbon footprint thresholds or efficiency requirements, et cetera, with a generally technology neutral approach is the right way also to foster innovation.
Well, if we can agree on a proper minimum efficiency requirement that excludes these single standing boilers, then that would be good. And not only good from the perspective of this industry, but also from the perspective of Energy Performance of Buildings Directive. That basically sets the same target for in 16 years. But we have another question in the audience. Frank Echterberg, also foresitter of the Dutch Heat Pump Association.
Yeah, thank you, Thomas. In fact, I should leave this message because what we're saying, the heat pump has an excellent business case. It should be done. And then there's the but. It also needs to be energy efficient, material efficient, etc. So that's why we make it so difficult. I actually wanted to go back to the question that Martin asked, why do we allow the member states to have the wrong ratio of electricity versus fossil fuel prices? The answer is it is up to the member states. But I want to make the discussion more complex by adding a dimension, because it's all too easy. I think in the room, even though, Mr. Soro, you're technology neutral, but we can agree easily on that should be the case. However, the money that is spent there, in fact, the key word is affordability. What I see in the Netherlands, we have moved that way. And in fact, we are going to force people to have at least a hybrid in 2026. But the cost of that needs to be compensated. And there's a lot of resistance, especially from a more rightly political-orientated political system. It needs to be compensated. So somebody, and maybe it's us from the heat pump sector, needs to think, how are we going to compensate there? That is the reason why we keep this fossil fuel so cheap. It's easy to say it should be more expensive, but then you get social unrest. So it needs to be compensated. Where does that money come from?
Walburga.
I very much agree. These upfront investments, not everyone can afford it. So the point I wanted to make earlier as well already on financing, there's a really great report that came out recently from E3G looking into how all of that can be financed, and it is very well also reflecting our view on the role of the ECB and the EIB as well. The EIB is Europe's climate bank. They're very proud to mention it at every event. I do think they could do more on de-risking. We in the solar sector, you have been mentioning you don't need better interest rates at the moment. In the solar sector, we definitely need better interest rates for our projects because at the moment what we see is that solar projects that have been bankable 2 years back are not bankable anymore. So here the ECB can play a major role. There is a possibility that the ECB has of dual interest rates, for example, making investments more interesting, and many other things as well. There's a whole list of actions that also the ECB could take. But one other thing I also wanted to mention is what we also see as, as something that could propel investments into solar and probably also heat pumps is encouraging new business cases, really business cases. What we see happening, for example, is that companies are taking the upfront investments and are then sharing the benefits with people that are open to get these investments. There's this beautiful example I always mention in Portugal, where there's a huge roof on a kindergarten. A company has been investing, putting solar on this roof. The electricity is shared with the neighborhood, so also people who cannot afford or do not have roofs. And there's a whole business case. The company is earning money. The people are earning money because they're reducing their energy bills, not just the kindergarten, but also in the surroundings. So I think the more we can incentivize these business cases where companies are taking the upfront investments and then everyone is sharing the benefits, is really something that we should be looking much more into.
And is that reflected in our industrialization strategy, I would ask? But we are running short of time, so I don't expect an answer. One word on this technology neutrality thing. We have been debating that a lot, and we think that you can be technology neutral as long as you're not fuel neutral. Because what we are seeing today is this promise on green XYZ that is not available at the end user's household. So if you allow people to continue to use fossil energy in waiting for some future. My neighbor is 83. He told me recently that he will not get an electric car. He will wait for hydrogen. I said to him, you probably will be dead before that arrives. Yeah, a bit more honesty. I have called for technology clarity on the topic, but Richard, he's one of the new kids on the block and disrupting the industry.
Thank you very much. Richard, my name from Termondo, the largest heat pump installer in Germany. We have installed last year over 3,000 heat pumps. My focus goes to the total cost of ownership because I believe this is quite an important one. We were talking about the upfront costs, and this is an issue. We know that 30% of the homeowners in Germany, they can't afford the upfront costs when it comes to a heat pump. However, there are business models in the market. We have established 8 years ago contracting for homeowners, and in 2022 we have established contracting for heat pumps. So it's possible to rent a heat pump, but there's also a lot of financing models right now. So upfront costs are no longer the big issue. The big issue is still the total cost of ownership. And that leads us back to the problem of the ratio between the fossil fuels or the gas price and the electricity price. At the end of the day, what we are trying to do, when we're not alone, there's other clean techs in the market, we try to bring it all together. So solar, the PV on the rooftop, the heat pump in the garden, and the home energy management systems and the wall box, etc. And all that needs to work together to bring down the total cost of ownership. At the end of the day, that's what matters when we're talking to hundreds of homeowners every week. This is what they want to know. Do I have to pay more or less if I install the different assets in the house? So I would like to focus the discussion, not now, but also later in the day, perhaps, on this topic of total cost of ownership. How can we bring it down together? Thank you.
So that was then less of a question, but more a statement. Thank you very much, Richard. Then I would like to conclude with a question to all of you. If in 5 years we are looking back at the newly phrased industrial strategy of Europe for clean tech, what do you think has remained in 5 years? So what will we still see as a successful part of that strategy, and we'll be happy that we decided in favor?
A wish list question?
You can put a wish up, or you can say, I'm sure this will be necessary and we will be happy that we did it.
I think it's really going strong on implementing the Net Zero Industry Act to have member states who are taking it up and taking it seriously. boldly implementing these resilience auctions, I think this can really make a big difference. And then the next MFF just needs to have a focus on financing those technologies which will be key in the transition and which will be key for the competitiveness of Europe. I think these are the two things that we need to concentrate on.
Well, being on target with the electrification and installation of renewables and low carbon energy, and with the manufacturing targets that we have set. On a aside, just thinking, God, do not give me another crisis. Do not give me another COVID. Do not give me another invasion of Russia. Do not give me another war. That would be already, helping a lot.
I think we will only be successful if we work more closely with the United States, because both the Americans and we are far behind the Chinese. So we should start building what we call the clean transatlantic marketplace, meaning we should start aligning standards for technical products in wind and solar, in grids and heat pumps, because that will suddenly give our companies a 700 million consumer market. If we're able to sell the same things that we sell here across the Atlantic, that would be a huge advantage.
Yes, I think 2 points. One is to have prioritized the right technologies where the expertise and the innovation is in Europe now for the Industry Act, and to build the right strategic partnership on where we have some weaknesses. And maybe the third point is to put in place a policy that is resilient enough to track how we progress against the targets and to be able to adjust while we go in case we haven't achieved what we were aiming for. So yeah, these 3 points.
Thank you very much, Chiara, Philipp, Stefano, Walburga, for an insightful, even though not very conclusive discussion. I think it is a complex topic, and it would have been too much to expect that we can solve all the issues this morning. But I do think that you see how complex the debate is, and I hope that also Caroline can take some insight, and hopefully we will see relative energy prices as at least a reference in the Council conclusions. And from my personal wish, it would actually really be technology clarity. So what Chiara says resonates with me most, to say we know which technology is delivered today, let's prioritize those. Let's also prioritize those when it comes to financing and the reduction of administrative burden so that the market can function. And that's what the letter also announced this morning, the integration. And he said integration on electrification, integration on technologies, integration on communication, so that we can make use of all these technologies for the development of new business models, for the development in the end of a clean tech industry and a clean tech solution space for all Europeans and beyond, potentially to the United States. I guess if this is successful, success will attract a lot of followers. So then we could really make Europe the powerhouse of clean tech. But I do see a lot of work ahead of us. Thank you very much. And I hope you find this insightful. We'll continue with the lunch break, and then we continue as EHPA with our Administrative General Assembly.